The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. This video is actually part of a larger video, which is the big picture of science video regarding this prediction that a bomb will explode in New York City on January 13th. I personally recommend you watch the other video in its entirety, but this section of it is, anyway, it's a section of that video. You can watch this video if you'd like. I've isolated a particular part of the story, which is its own thing. And so you can either, watch the other video and not watch this video, or watch them both and thereby watch this section a second time. It's up to you. But this is an amazing story and it must be watched, and it's in the latter half of the other video. Do not skip the first part of the other video. That's why the hockey game, and it was a prophetic hockey game because the Bruins, the Boston Bruins it was played in Massachusetts, by the way, and it was played in Boston. This game was played in Montreal. That's why it was prophetic too. But it was Boston, which brings us to Massachusetts again. It was Boston versus the Montreal Canadiens. And it was a prophetic game because one of the records was beaten, maybe the most wins in a season or something to that effect. I was following closely and I could recite to you these stats at the time, but the Boston Bruins were extremely prophetic in the spring of 2023. And it all climaxed also with this game on Montreal Island. Okay? But the reason for Boston is because of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, and that's why the score was 5-4. But the area code for Montreal Island is also 514, which again is more confirmation that this was all pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. And this theme of slavery and freedom, which is what the mark of the Antichrist represents. When you take it, you are a slave to the system. And the limiting of freedom and all of that with the system. Okay, you get the idea. I've explained it. And so the currency is going to be programmed, like I was saying, to restrict the buying and selling of food. I think I said that. Okay. So that's why this is all relevant too. Now, the reason why they fled to Mississauga is because the biggest evacuation in the 20th century was the bomb train, what they call a bomb train, when the toxic freight train carrying toxic gases exploded in Mississauga, causing an evacuation in 1979, which was right at the time, like in the final years of the mass migration. I mean, in other words, most of the migration, the fleeing from Montreal had happened in the few years prior to it. And so, in other words, by the time of the bomb train in Mississauga, Mississauga had become this enormous city because it hadn't been prior to it. And 200,000 people evacuated in the middle of the night. And this is my earliest memory because I was born in Mississauga. God designed all of this all along, this life of mine, for this video. My earliest memory is in 1979 and the emergency evacuation in the middle of the night because of the train that had exploded with the toxic material. Yep. And that's why Mississauga is a part of this story. Now, this date here, April 13th, it was 2023. One of the things that was known about this date ahead of time is that it was exactly 370 weeks And I already explained the significance of 37, how it is symbolic of 3 sets of 7. It was exactly 370 weeks. Let me just expand on that, because I don't think it's in the clip. Trump was elected, or he was inaugurated, I should say, at the age of 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. 73 days after he won by 77 electoral votes, on the same day that Netanyahu was in office for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days, him being symbolism for Joshua, the leader of Israel. And that, in turn, was exactly 73 weeks after Trump famously descended the golden escalator in his Trump Tower, the symbolic beginning of Trump. So 73 weeks right there, right? 3 sets of 7. That day was exactly 188 months after the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. And the walls of security collapsed in Jericho after the 3 sets of 7, and the trumpets were blown due to an earthquake. And archaeology proves this. And they were led by Joshua. The reason for the 188 months is because the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word for woe, exclamation mark, used in the context of extreme judgment from God in the Bible. Okay, so back to what I was saying. This date here, I'm talking about this theme of Mississauga now, and how the Montreal Island hockey game pointed to it. Oh, and by the way, also on this day, the S&P 500 gained 54 points. On the 5-4 game day, 7 plus 7 plus 7 days before the date, 5-4 as I mentioned, the S&P 500 gained 54 points. And that's relevant too, because 500 in the Greek concordance, G500 is the word for Antichrist. Okay. So yes, the S&P 500 gained 54 points on this day too. But anyway, it all points to Mississauga because that's the point of pointing to Montreal Island, the mass evacuation and the fleeing down the King's Highway to Mississauga. Now, and that all points to the bomb train, which is what we're talking about because this is this theme. And by the way, that's when the bomb train happened in East Palestine. The night before, God, I can only lay this at the feet of God. I don't know how this happened, the coincidence of the timing, but I was online surfing, learning about the train derailment and the bomb train in Mississauga. And then the next day was the bomb train in Ohio. And by the way, Ontario rhymes with Ohio. Mississauga, Ontario. I mean, that's amazing. And they're both native language words too. Ohio, Ontario. I mean, okay. So the bomb train in East Palestine is another prophetic sign. It's pointing to all of this. But that's when I realized that there would be as a result of the bomb. Because like I said at the beginning of the video, I've known that the bomb was going to happen in Manhattan since July of 2019. But it wasn't until the February of 2023 that I realized that there would be a mass evacuation from Manhattan Island due to toxic material. Okay, so back to this story of Mississauga that I'm talking about. This date here, again, this connection I'm explaining was known ahead of time, was exactly 370 weeks after the Prime Minister of Canada met the President of the U.S. for a state dinner in Washington, D.C. on March 10th, 2016. Okay? Justin Trudeau had a state dinner with Barack Obama at the White House on this date. During the state dinner, Barack Obama talked about his visit to Canada, which was incidentally, not coincidentally, it's prophetic, right in the summer of when he rose to power. I mean, literally, it was like just days before he became a national thing. Because he became a national thing when he gave the speech at the Democrat convention. And I think it was the second last speech or something. So he gave this big speech. The Democrat Party was clearly putting him on stage, saying that he was the future of the party, despite him being the most radical senator in the US Senate in terms of voting record. But that didn't matter. He spoke well. He was a nice speaking, Barack Obama is the speaker. In fact, Bible prophecy says that the second of the two antichrists, speaks like a dragon. So in other words, Bible prophecy speaks on this antichrist's ability to speak. And that's Obama. He became the president on his ability to deliver a speech. Period. Right? And, well, not period. He tapped into evil. He spoke the leftism language, which is evil. Well, anyway, let's get back to what I was saying. So Barack Obama had Justin Trudeau at the White House. Now, this was just after Trudeau was elected in November of 2015, just a few months after. It was November 4th, 2015, exactly 7 years after Barack Obama was elected, the 44th president, on the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. Now, I spoke earlier about the significance of 7 years. Again, in Bible prophecy, 7 years symbolizes the period of the end. But also, it's equivalent to 84, which is the equivalent of, in gematria, the name Obama and the word bomb. In other words, the 7 years connection in between the election of these two partners in crime, the Antichrist and his partner in crime, the Prime Minister of Canada, the 51st state, because Barack Obama will become the 51st vice president before he becomes the president again. This connection is ultimately pointing to the predicted bomb, because 84 months hints at bomb, and they were elected exactly 84 months apart. And that's quite significant because unlike elections in the US, elections in Canada don't occur in the same month every year, let alone the same date. An election in Canada can occur on any date of the year. I don't think they're ever going to have it on a Sunday, but you know what I'm saying. And that's why it's even more special that we have this exact 7 years or 84 months connection between their two elections. Now, also, Justin Trudeau is the 23rd Prime Minister. And I explained earlier how God's big picture of signs works on pairing 23 and 44 together. That's how the big picture works. It works on pairing these numbers together, as I've been explaining in this diagram, in this video. So the two antichrists, if you will, because Justin Trudeau isn't technically one of the two antichrists in Bible prophecy, although I do suspect he is, the 10 kings symbolizes this, if you know what I'm talking about in Bible prophecy. But anyway, these two partners in crime, let's just put it that way, are the 23rd and 44th leaders of their nations. That's astounding beyond words. And they were elected 77 years. And by the way, Barack Obama was born on the date 8/4. I forgot to mention that earlier. Not only does his name equal 84, and it's the word bomb, but he was born on the date 8/4, August 4th. And speaking of dates, that's what this is about, because it's the date 11/4, and which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. And it's the 4th of the month, and the day that Obama was elected was exactly 579 months after he was born, both being the 4th days of the month. 579 is prophetic because God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and 579 is equal to 193 plus 193 plus 193. And 193 is the 44th prime number. In other words, it's the 44th prime number plus the 44th prime number plus the 44th prime number between the birth of the 44th president and the election of the 44th president. Yes, that's amazing. But back to what I was saying. Now, there's something that's widely known called the Richard Nixon prophecy. President Nixon visited Ottawa, Canada for a state dinner in, I forget which year. Let's see. I can figure it out because that's part of the prophecy. It was in March of 1972. And at the dinner, President Nixon gave a toast. The dinner, by the way, was hosted by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father. Okay? So Justin Trudeau, the 23rd Prime Minister of Canada, is the son of Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, who had Nixon at the Capitol for a state dinner in March of 1972. Okay? At the dinner, Richard Nixon toasted to Pierre Trudeau, or not to Trudeau, but he gave a toast. And his toast was to the future Prime Minister of Canada, referring to 4-month-old Justin Trudeau. Okay? And then Justin Trudeau became the Prime Minister of Canada. All right? That's the Richard Nixon prophecy. And then Barack Obama mentioned this prophecy by Richard Nixon at the state dinner in Washington, D.C., when Justin Trudeau had dinner with Barack Obama. So it was like the state dinner in Washington was like a fulfillment of this prophecy, if you will, because the prophecy was made at a state dinner, and then Justin Trudeau was at a state dinner shortly after he was elected. Who knows? That's maybe even why Barack Obama decided to have Justin Trudeau for a state dinner so soon after he was elected. But probably also because the two are kindred spirits, and they knew that because they're on the same spectrum. They're both leftism religionists. They're both members of the most dynamic religion of the 20th century that has conquered every aspect of culture in the West. Okay, so anyway, that's the Richard Nixon prophecy. But what isn't known and is only being spoken of in this video is the true extent of this prophecy. Because at the time, Justin Trudeau was 4 months old, and the state dinner was exactly 44 years to the month after the Richard Nixon prophecy. In other words, Nixon toasted to the future Prime Minister, the 4-month-old Justin Trudeau, and 44 years later to the month, Justin Trudeau attended a state dinner with the Antichrist, the 44th president. In other words, it identified the 44th president as the Antichrist. And furthermore, Justin Trudeau is the 23rd Prime Minister who was elected exactly 84 months, or 7 years, after the election of the 44th president. That is the Richard Nixon prophecy. Now, here is the thing. During the state dinner, during Obama's speech, if you will, Obama mentioned the name Mississauga 3 times. Mississauga is the 7th biggest city in Canada. It was a 3 sets of 7. And I've, prior to this, explained the prophetic significance of Mississauga with its bomb train symbolism and the fleeing of oppressive minority laws, which is what's coming from the Antichrist. Obama mentioned Mississauga 3 times in a row because he was jokingly having trouble pronouncing the name. And fair enough, when you look at the name on a piece of paper and you are not from Canada, you would not know how to pronounce Mississauga. So he made a joke about it. He, jokingly, half-heartedly attempted to pronounce it twice. Then a third time, he pretty much got it. Or not, I forget. But he did it 3 times. And Canada is the 7th biggest city. But this was after he mentioned the Richard Nixon prophecy. And Richard Nixon was the 37th president. That's right. And this day, this state dinner about the 37th president's prophecy, in which Obama mentioned Mississauga 3 times, the 7th biggest city. This day was exactly 370 weeks before this date, which included the prophetic hockey game in Montreal, on Montreal Island in Canada. In the area code 514, the game score was 5-4. In other words, it pointed to Montreal Island, because that's the area code of Montreal Island, which points to Manhattan Island and the coming explosion. Now, in the process of talking about Mississauga, he went like this. And I have a clip of it, by the way, in the must-watch East Palestine video. You must watch it. Like I said at the beginning, you must watch the 54th Massachusetts video and you must watch the East Palestine video, okay? But in it, there's a clip, and believe me, you need to watch those videos, okay? In there is a clip of Obama saying this. But he says basically the 3 attempts to pronounce Mississauga, a place that he said he went to, and then he said, and then I went to Toronto and Niagara Falls, as a joke. He said it like that. He said it like that too, like out of breath. And then I went to Toronto and Niagara Falls, the easy place that everyone knows, you know? Okay, so Niagara Falls, because this is symbolism for Noah's flood, the power of water moving over the earth. Also, God is pointing to the historic barge that is stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River. Niagara is native language meaning straight and narrow way, which refers to Christ. And the rocks are symbolic of Christ. The barge is stuck on the rocks. It's symbolic of the ark in Noah's flood, which is also symbolic of Christ. And the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, which symbolizes the rescue of Noah and his family, which involved, by the way, the U.S. Coast Guard, making it also a U.S. sign, because it's stuck on the Canadian side of the falls, which is the horseshoe side of the falls. And the predicted date that the barge will crash over Niagara Falls, by the way, is August 6th, 7 days before the predicted solar flare will knock out the power in North America, and Niagara Falls is known for generating power. And 7 days because of the 7 days warning and the count of the flood. And also Niagara Falls engenders a perennial rainbow, and Barack Obama is the rainbow president. But he visited all of this right before he rose to power, like I was saying, with the speech, right at the same month even. And what else is to say? There's a couple other things. Let me just finish this Niagara Falls thing, because Niagara Falls, the horseshoe of it, is directly pointing to the CN Tower. In other words, it's a game of horseshoes. Because in a game of horseshoes, you aim the horseshoe straight ahead at the metal stick. The CN Tower is symbolic of the metal stick that the horseshoe falls is 100% directly pointing to. Go look at it on Google Maps if you would like. It points to the stick because it's pointing to a symbolic game of horseshoes. But why is that? God is pointing to this because, well, let me say this first. The CN Tower in God's signs, not just me saying this, in God's signs is symbolic of the Tower of Babel. And Toronto, a place that I grew up but not as an adult, I left Toronto, the suburbs of Toronto, and I, like I mentioned, was born in Mississauga when I went to university. But I know the city well because my family has lived there ever since then. And it is the Tower of Babel city. the leftists decided it would be a good idea to fill Canada with the cultures of the world as if it were an empty box with which to stuff the other cultures of the world. And they've made it in Toronto the city of the Tower of Babel. And that city is symbolized as being the Tower of Babel city with its metal stick, with the CN Tower. Anyway, the reason why the Niagara Falls, and by the way, the Tower of Babel story is Antichrist. That's the purpose. That's the point. The coming together of the different peoples, the world is communism, it's socialism, right? Jesus said, do not think I came to bring unity and peace, but I came to bring division with the sword. If you don't understand that, you don't understand Jesus and also God's prerogative and his plan with a capital P. That's why the opposite of the plan is collectivism, which is why it's evil and inevitably leads to evil and the restricting of human rights. But it's because by nature, God's plan is to divide. I mean, Genesis begins with division. He divided the night and the day and the waters from the earth, etc. He's in the process of dividing the sheep from the goats, the wheat from the chaff. That's what this purpose of all of this is. The Satan, the enemy, knows this, and that's why it's all about collectivism and unity coming together in a Tower of Babel, an attempt to reach heaven collectively with technology and with human ingenuity without God. That's the Tower of Babel story in a nutshell, right? Okay. Which incidentally is Genesis chapter 11, which is why the Twin Towers were replaced with the one tower and the one world tower, and the Twin Towers looked like a giant 11 in the 11th state, and were struck by Flight 11 with a crew of 11 people in New York City, which is made of 11 letters. Anyway, the reason for God pointing to this with the Niagara Falls barge is that when the asteroid hits Earth, as described in the book of Revelation, there will be an earthquake that causes the waters of the Great Lakes to spill out over the Midwest. That's what the power of water with the Niagara Falls is pointing to. It's going to spill out. Lake Ontario is going to spill out over the Tower of Babel City. All right. Okay. So, which is, by the way, Canada's biggest city and the fourth biggest city in North America. Okay. So, back to the 370 weeks connection. Another thing about Obama being in Mississauga is that the reason why he was in Mississauga, because he was visiting, by the way, his half-sister. And so, but they went to a restaurant in Mississauga. That's his time in Mississauga. And I discovered the name of the restaurant, and I forget the name now, but it has in its title Mountain or Mountain View or something. It's a high place. That's because the name Bama in Hebrew means high place. Both lowercase b and capital B, proper noun, high place. Bama, high place. Because in the Bible, the Jews would conduct false religious worship to their false gods on the tops of mountains. High places is a euphemism in the Bible for this. So that's why Obama's name is High Place. It's Antichrist false worship symbolism. And leftism is a false religion. And it is a religion with many isms embedded in it. Okay. So I think I've successfully established this connection to Mississauga, the 370 weeks connection, and the significance of Obama saying Mississauga 3 times. It all points to the bomb train, but it also ties into this hockey game in Montreal Island, which is why Mississauga, because as I've explained, which also is about Massachusetts. This was on the day of the arrest of the Massachusetts documents leaker, which leaking of radioactive material and an evacuation, just like the evacuation from Montreal Island down Kings Highway. You get the idea now, right? All right, we are almost done this truly profound diagram. Now, this Manhattan blackout, which connects to the Manhattan Project, as I explained, and also the day of the Hurricane Barry, which hints at Barack Obama, the predicted future 48th president, is exactly 22 times 3 months before the predicted bomb, which will lead to Barack Obama becoming the 48th president. 22 times 3 hints at 223, which is the 48th prime number. Also, it's 3 times 22 months. And that's because this is very important and points to this verse in Genesis chapter 3, verse 22, which symbolizes this coming big lie at the end of the age, which was the lie at the beginning of the age, which was when the serpent, Satan, told Eve in the garden that she shall surely not die. The coming promise of immortality without God, through demons pretending to be aliens, is coming. And it'll be the big lie at the end of the age that's making the age come full circle. And it'll be involved, and it will involve the mark of the Antichrist, this promise of immortality. It is Tower of Babel, trying to reach the heavens, immortality, be like God without God, which is leftism, which is socialism, and secular atheism, because the two are flip sides of the same coin. When you lose God, you inevitably, like a law of the universe, get communism. You get totalitarianism. It is the default, first of all, it is the default form of society. And the only reason why it doesn't exist in North America today and other places in the world is because of the influence of America and the Christian civilization. But when you get rid of it, the vacuum is inevitably filled with communism and totalitarianism. That's just the way it works. The founders knew it. John Adams said, we have something, we created something that is only applicable only for a moral and religious people. It is completely unapplicable for any other people. I'm paraphrasing. That's what he said, though. Okay? And all of the founders agreed. They all said similar things. Okay? Even Washington said it in his inauguration address, I believe. Or was it his farewell speech? I forget. Anyway, one more thing for this, one more trail of signs here for this diagram. We were at the Hawaii missile alert, the false missile alert in Hawaii, the home state of the 44th president. And exactly 44 weeks later was the announcement of the discovery of the Argentine submarine and the tragedy of the deaths of 44 sailors that were on the sub. And in Argentina, the tragedy is referred to colloquially as the 44 sailors, which is confirmation of the 44 weeks. But this submarine is also, the story of the submarine involves an explosion, because the international effort to search for the submarine after it sank revolved around the detected explosion by the agency responsible for detecting underwater, under-ocean nuclear detonations to prevent nuclear testing under the ocean. So this explosion was detected by the nuclear organization involved in detecting explosions. That's why this is an explosion sign. And it was announced almost exactly a year later, one day exactly, more than a year. And 1 year is 4 plus 4 plus 4 months. So that also hints at the 44th president and the 44 sailors. Okay, now this day was known ahead of time, and one reason being is that it was the date 99 and 5779 in the Hebrew calendar. And the number 9 is the most important number in God's sciences from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. That's why 9 days before this, I also expected something, and that was the day of the campfire, also known as the Paradise, California fire, the apocalyptic burning and evacuation of Paradise, California. So here we have our evacuation sign in context of an explosion sign. Because on this day, Trump visited Paradise, California, God's trumpet. But it was also the date 9/9/5779, 9 days after the start of the fire. All right? And Trump visited Paradise, California on this day. So you have this evacuation, because it was the apocalyptic evacuation of this place, Paradise, California, that burned really almost instantaneously. And then it was also partly burned was Helltown, which was right near Paradise, California. Okay, you get the idea here. Paradise, because Peter said that the coming judgment would be symbolized by fire and not by water. The first judgment was symbolized by water. Okay. The flood. Okay, actually the first judgment was when Adam and Eve were kicked out of paradise. Okay, so the Garden of Eden. Now, the thing is that Trump's day in Paradise, California, was the 666th day he was in office, which gives us Antichrist symbolism. And again, he is trumpet, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs. Because then again, in archaic English, the name Trump or the word Trump means trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet. Trump was trumpeting judgment in paradise on the date 9/9 and 5779, 666 days after he left office, which is also, or was, 666 days after Obama left office. And Obama is the Antichrist, the 44th president, hence the 44 sailors and the explosion sign. Okay. Also on this day, on 9/9 and 5779, the UN passed 9 resolutions condemning Israel. And the Antichrist in the end times will lead the world in an effort to divide God's land and make Jerusalem an international city, the biggest transgression the world will make, for which it will be judged in the end. All of this 9s here is why we had 9 days to get to this prophetic sign, which was the 7 minutes of terror before the NASA probe InSight landed on Mars, the red planet, which is the red dragon that's thrown down from heaven to earth in the book of Revelation. This probe's mission is to detect Mars quakes, which are essentially explosions. Or at least, if anything, symbolism for explosions. So we have a detecting explosions sign 9 days after the explosion detection sign, because again, this sign is about the detection of the explosion of the 44 sailors submarine. And by the way, also God pairs 44 and 9 because the 44th president was inaugurated in 09. And that's how God's signs works, as I explained. That also pairs with the 44 weeks, as I explained. So does the 9 resolutions pair with the 44 weeks. Okay, and the date 9/9. So that's how God's signs works, pairing these 9 numbers together. 9 and 23, 9 and 44, 44 and 23, as I've explained. Now, one last connection here. This is amazing too, because in simple English gematria, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, the word bomb is equal to 32. And so from this detection of explosions sign, this NASA InSight sign, it is exactly 320 weeks to the predicted explosion in New York City. Also, the name Obama in simple English gematria equals 32. And again, Obama will become the president again through the coming martial law and the emergency after this predicted explosion in New York City. Also, Obama will be the 48th president, and 32 is equal to 4 times 8. Also, Obama was born on the date 8/4, and 32 is equal to 8 times 4. And also, Obama is equal to 84 in Hebrew gematria. Also, the only president to serve more than 2 terms was the 32nd president. Barack Obama will serve more than 2 terms. He will serve a 3rd term, just like the 32nd president. And the number 32 is 4 times 8, and Barack Obama is predicted to be the 48th president. One thing that I forgot to mention here that's very significant regarding the Richard Nixon prophecy and the purpose of using Justin Trudeau and his father, Pierre Trudeau, is that these were the only two prime ministers in Canadian history to use the Emergencies Act. They enacted a law that temporarily did away with the Constitution, if you will, the Canadian version of it. And this is a symbolism for what is coming with the coming explosion. The Richard Nixon prophecy, as I'm explaining here, points to, through the bomb train and everything like I explained, it points to this coming explosion, which will be followed by martial law. And that's why God pointed to or used Pierre Trudeau and Justin Trudeau and their enacting of the Emergencies Act. And on the subject of the Emergencies Act in 2022, the other video that is one of my favorites is the truckers' protest video. One must watch that video. Now, there's another aspect to this Mississauga bomb train prophecy. Well, there's actually tons more. Like I said, the full explanation is in the other video that I made that, like I said, leads to February 3rd, 2024. Like I said, it's a must watch. But I'm giving you a surface level explanation here, and I don't mean for it to be a substitute for the other fuller explanation. But I got to make a video anyway in this context of this diagram. And so what else should be added here is the mayor of Mississauga. The mayor of Mississauga, during the time of the bomb train, well, let's back up. Let's talk about the date of the bomb train. That was November 10th, 1979. 1979 is an extremely important year in God's signs for many, many reasons. And that's explained more so in the Jimmy Carter videos. It was during the time of the Carter presidency, and the Jimmy Carter presidency is extremely prophetic. And I have made many videos talking about it. Okay, so, and essentially too, it's pointing to 7 years of prophetic signs followed by an 8th and a 9th year of the judgment and destruction for America. And on that note, that leads us to the end at the end of 2026. And the bomb train in Mississauga was 2 months and 26 days after the release of the extremely prophetic Apocalypse Now video. The Apocalypse Now video is a video, or rather I should say movie. A movie is a prophetic sign from God that is communicating in God's signs the apocalypse beginning now. But there's so much to say and has been said in other videos, and like I'm saying in the Jimmy Carter videos, that explains this. And so anyway, but the reason why 2 months and 26 days is relevant, not only does it hint at 2026, that's how huge this is, by the way. This Mississauga bomb train, that it would be connecting with a number that communicates the end and the return of Lord Jesus Christ, which begins with the 2 years of destruction, begins after the 7 years of prophetic signs with the predicted bomb in New York City that's being pointed to with the bomb train. The 79, right? The 7 years have passed from 2017 until 2024, the end of which. And then we have 2025, 2026 as being this symbolic 9, if you will, the 8th and 9th year following the 7. So that's why 79, Apocalypse Now. The Apocalypse Now was released 2 months and 26 days before the bomb train that I'm talking about, the biggest evacuation in North American history in Mississauga. Okay, and again, that these two signs were in 1979 because of the 7 years plus the 8th and 9th year, symbolized by 79, which leads us to the end of 2026 and the return of Lord Jesus Christ and Judgment Day. Okay, so that's that. Oh, the reason again, not only is it for the purpose of pointing to 2026, 2 months and 26 days, but God is using this frequently in his big picture of signs because H226 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word that means prophetic sign. And so that's what this is. The bomb train and the Apocalypse Now are prophetic signs. Also, this is important, huge. Again, I said that God pairs 23 and 44 to confirm the signs and connections. And again, this prophecy between Obama and Trudeau is about the 44th president and the 23rd prime minister. This Canadian bomb train in Mississauga, Ontario, was 2 times 3 days, which hints at 23, after 11/4, the date that Obama and Trudeau were elected, which was the beginning of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis, which coincided with the last 444 days of Carter's presidency, because there are many parallels between Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama, including them claiming to be quote-unquote Christian. Anyway, there's lots to be said, and I explained this in other videos, including the Jimmy Carter malaise video, and also another recent video. And so I won't explain that anymore. The parallels between Obama and Carter, that's for the subject of another video anyway. We want to stay focused here. Like I said, it's very difficult to keep focused because God's big picture of signs is not linear. It's interconnected and infinite. But the 444-day Iran hostage crisis also led to the attempted rescue of the hostages, in which resulted in a plane crash. Barack Obama, the 44th president, will become the president again as a result of this bomb, and Kamala Harris's death, predicted death in a plane crash. And that plane crash in the attempted rescue of the hostages during the 444-day Iran hostage crisis led to the deaths of 4 plus 4 military service personnel and 4 injured in Operation Eagle Claw. All right. There's all kinds of symbolism in the hostage crisis as well, but it's a subject for another video. Okay, so let's just keep it at that. But this all does point to the 44th president. That's why this occurred on the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44, I should say, which is why the 44th president was elected on the date 11/4. The 23rd Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, was also elected on the date 11/4, and that was exactly 36 years after the beginning of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis. 36, like I said earlier, explained earlier, hints at 666. It's 3 6s. It hints at 3 6s. It is also 6 times 6 and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. So this is more confirmation that indeed this is a prophecy identifying the Antichrist, whose number is 666 in Bible prophecy. And also that Justin Trudeau is a partner in crime. And I'll just say this too. It was yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. Well, it depends which time zone. Anyway, it was either yesterday or 2 days ago that Justin Trudeau announced that he would resign. The news broke a couple of days before that, or leaked, that he was about to resign. But it was unclear whether he would resign immediately or stay on until another new leader for the Liberal Party would be chosen. And I said, there's absolutely, I predicted there's no way that it'll be anything other than him staying on until there's a new leader. Because he is the partner in crime in the end times with Barack Obama. He isn't going to leave. And his resignation means that we are on the doorstep of the emergency. That's why he's the Emergencies Act Prime Minister. The fact that he's leaving soon means that the end is going to begin within that period of time. Which like I'm saying in this video, predicting to be right now. January 13th, the explosion for the bomb. Okay, the predicted bomb in New York. So, the other thing is too, what I wanted to get at here is part of this story, which is amazing and hasn't been told yet, which is the story of the mayor of Mississauga, Mayor Hazel McCallion. Hazel McCallion, or I should say Mayor Hazel McCallion, is, for whatever better word, she is an icon. She is an icon in Canadian politics. She was the mayor of this city of Mississauga for 36 years. Which is why, incidentally, Justin Trudeau was elected exactly 36 years after the beginning of the Iran hostage crisis. So this is Antichrist symbolism. I'm not saying anything about McCallion. Let's just leave it at that. She is an important symbol in God's signs here. She presided over the evacuation, the mass migration from Montreal to Mississauga. She oversaw the expansion of her city. It was during her reign that Mississauga became the 7th biggest city in Canada. So she saw it from small beginnings, relatively, to become what it is today. And it was largely because of this mass migration from Montreal. I mean, basically, Montreal was transplanted to Toronto, and the place to grow was right next to Toronto, which was the city of Mississauga. All right? So, she was mayor for an astounding 36 years. And I believe the only reason why she retired is because of her age. And she became mayor not at a young age, incidentally. I don't know the age, but I do know the age at which she died, which was not long after she retired. She died at the age of 101. And that is amazing beyond words because she presided over the mass migration from Montreal to Mississauga due to Bill 101. That's right. The oppressive minority laws, that is symbolism. Not only that, by the way, it's symbolism for the oppressive minority laws of the Israelites in Egypt, if I didn't mention that. It's symbolism for the Exodus. In fact, I did fail to mention this earlier. The coming predicted evacuation from Manhattan Island is also symbolism for the evacuation from Exodus. But that also is symbolism for the coming evacuation of God's people in the rapture. Forgot to mention that. That's extremely important. That's what all of this evacuation and mass migration symbolism is all about. What's ironic too, though, is that Montreal, and I think it still is, but probably isn't today, but could be wrong, could still be the biggest center of Jewish people, Jewish population in Canada. Probably Toronto now, though, given that Toronto displaced Montreal in demographics in general. But so that is the irony too, is that again, they fled down the highway that connects the two cities, which is the King's Highway. And the Israelites fled the king of Egypt. And so a lot of the people that fled Montreal to Mississauga would have been Jews. Oh, and there's another parallel. The people that fled were the people that built Montreal. It wasn't Francophones that built Montreal. Montreal was an Anglo city, and it always has been. Because the Catholic Church in history encouraged the French to stay out of the city and in the rural countryside of Quebec. And so Montreal, the city on Montreal Island in the river, in the St. Lawrence River, was built by Anglophones. That's the irony also. But that's the case with ancient Egypt. The biblical story is how the Jews were very important in the building of ancient Egypt before they had to flee, before they were oppressed, before they were resented. Okay. So that's another amazing parallel. Anyway, we have Hazel McCallion dying at the age of 101 because God is pointing to Bill 101, in which she presided over. She presided over this time, like I just have explained, right? It's so amazing. She was the mayor during the time that people were fleeing because of Bill 101. And she was mayor for 36 years, which is a number that symbolizes 666, the number of the Antichrist. And the Antichrist will enforce the mark of the Antichrist with oppressive minority laws. Okay? Now, Hazel McCallion also was nicknamed Hurricane Hazel. That's because she became mayor not long after a very famous hurricane that hit Toronto. You've probably never heard of a hurricane hitting Toronto. That's because hurricanes don't hit Toronto. If you know where Toronto is, it's far inland. This was a prophetic thing from God to give Hurricane Hazel her nickname for the prophetic purposes of what I'm explaining here. So there was this what would you call it? A weather event that, I mean, can be explained but shouldn't have happened. But there was a system that used, I don't know, I forget, it's been a while since I read about it, but the atmosphere provided that the hurricane skipped over some land and then came down essentially and targeted Toronto with the rain, with the massive amount of rain from the hurricane, which caused unprecedented flooding in Toronto and the deaths of 81 people. And if I recall, they were living on an island in the river. Wow. I could be wrong, and I'm not going to look it up. You should look it up if you're interested. But I'm pretty sure it was an island, and that's amazing, and I never connected the two until just now, because, of course, we're talking about the escape from Montreal Island and Manhattan Island. But there was an island in Toronto and the river in the valley, which people dwelled on, and it killed 81 people, and that's extremely prophetic because 81 is a number that symbolizes 9/11. Not only were there 81 passengers on the first plane that struck the first tower, which, by the way, hints at 9, because 8 plus 1 equals 9, and it was a crew of 11 on that flight. With a crew of 11 and passenger number hinting at 9, you have a 9/11. The same was true with the second flight. There was 9 crew and 56 passengers. And 56 hints at 11. 5 plus 6 is 11. But anyway, also, 9 divided by 11 is equal to 0.8181 into infinity. So 81 is a number that embeds in it the 9/11 warning of judgment. And that warning of judgment points back to Massachusetts, which is, like I explained earlier, a rhyme with Mississauga. Both of these native Indian names that are really long and hard to pronounce and begin with an M, obviously, and have some S's in it. Okay, so it's clearly a parallel here. Mississauga is designed by God to be hinting at Massachusetts, and I'm in the process of proving that to you, and how this all comes together, and why she died at 101, and furthermore, why it was Bill 101 that had the oppressive minority laws. This is all because of the pilgrims that were escaping oppressive minority laws by the king. And they came to the New World, like I explained it probably earlier, thinking in their minds that the New World represented their promised land. And they saw, literally, their crossing of the Atlantic as analogous to the Israelites escaping religious persecution or minority persecution from the king of Egypt. And again, they fled Bill 101 down the King's Highway, just to remind you again. All right, now, and so when the Israelites crossed the Jordan River, that was analogous for the pilgrims to them crossing the Atlantic. And how many passengers were there? 101. Yep. How many days did it take? It took an unexpected, I think, triple the time that they expected. They got blown off course, way off course by a storm designed by God, and got hooked into Cape Cod, which if you look at the geography of it, it essentially is a fish hook because God is fishing for men. Yes, that's right. God fished for men with the pilgrims. And he fished for the pilgrims and the fished for men to make his nation of disciples, America. But anyway, it took them 66 days to cross the Atlantic, and 66 is the 11th triangular number. In a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 11th row is 66. Because God is pointing to this number, 11, including with the 101 passengers. The 101 passengers hints at the number 11, as I will explain here. And so does Bill 101 and her age at 101. The reason for the number, well, also, after the pilgrims in 1620 on the Mayflower, John Winthrop led the 11 ship flotilla and founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony and Boston. Before they departed their ships, John Winthrop delivered his famous City on a Shining Hill sermon that Ronald Reagan cited in his farewell speech, which incidentally was on the date 1/11, another hint at 11, in 1989. And that's also, 1989 is also prophetic because it's 13 times 153. And in Jesus' last miracle, 153 fish were caught in the net. And 13 represents him and the 12 disciples that started the age of fishing for men. And so 1989 symbolizes the end of the age of fishing for men. And it's only symbolism. It was a sign that symbolized the end. And including Reagan's speech, which, by the way, was exactly 40 weeks before the World Series earthquake. And Jesus used the metaphor of birth pains in context of earthquake signs regarding his return. And according to the medical profession, the average human gestation period is 40 weeks. And so that's why God uses these 40 weeks, but it connects with 40 weeks to an earthquake, the very famous one. And anyway, that's getting off subject now. Back to what I was saying about the number 11, though. The reason for all of the 11, let me just hold off. So you've got the The Pilgrims on the Mayflower, 101, their journey was the 11th triangular number of days, the 11-ship flotilla, and you've got the Titanic also, which was a prophetic sign of judgment from God for America, and it sank on its maiden voyage because it was symbolism for the maiden voyage of the Pilgrims. And the big serial number on the giant propeller of the Titanic is 101. At the bottom of the ocean, it's 101 right there. Symbolism for man's hubris, incidentally, thinking that this was the unsinkable ship. Okay, now, John Winthrop, after he delivered that City on a Shining Hill speech, well, I'll say the speech first. Okay, so the reason why all of the 11 is that the number 11 is symbolism for reflection. If God were to symbolize this concept of mirror or reflection, it would be a 1 and a 1, 2 straight lines. And it wouldn't be 22 or 33, it would be 11. But the reason for that is because John Winthrop's speech, his famous speech, was derived from Deuteronomy chapter 28, which was the words from Moses from God to the Israelites before they crossed into the promised land. Deuteronomy chapter 28 regards God's promises for either blessings or curses, depending on whether or not they obey his commandments or not, after they enter the promised land. And you really need to read Deuteronomy chapter 28. In fact, you can see in Deuteronomy chapter 28, 9/11. For example, it talks about an eagle swooping down in the section of the curses, and on the tail of the plane that struck the towers was an eagle. It was an American Eagle flight, but there was a giant eagle on the tail of the plane, and the plane was swooping down. Also, the chapter talks about the Israelites walking on iron and the sky being bronze. That was 9/11. With all of the debris of the iron on the ground and the sky being bronze red because of the smoke, if you recall. Okay. Well, the thing is, John Winthrop, the first governor of Massachusetts, lived on Governor's Island, which today is where Logan Airport is. And it was from Logan Airport that Flight 11, with its crew of 11 people, flew into the Twin Towers, was hijacked and then flown into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state to join the Union, in New York City, a name made of 11 letters. This all points to John Winthrop's speech, okay? And so the coming curse of the Antichrist king is the reverse of the Pilgrims escaping persecution from the King of England. It's the promised curses for America and destruction of America, which is the symbolism in this Bill 101 and oppressive minority laws. God's people are about to be persecuted by the Antichrist king with oppressive minority laws. That's why the mayor was mayor for 36 years, which ends at 666, and died at the age of 101. And she presided over Mississauga, which ends at Massachusetts. And the Pilgrims leaving England was also a form of exodus, evacuation, like the exodus from Montreal Island to Mississauga, the Pilgrims' exodus from the Old World to Massachusetts. Now, the mayor saw her city grow from a small city to the seventh biggest city in Canada, and her prophetic funeral in 2023 is exactly 700 days before the predicted bomb in Manhattan and the predicted evacuation exodus from Manhattan Island. Oh, and if I forgot to mention, Mayor Hazel McCallion, Hurricane Hazel, she presided during the time of the bomb train. She became a hero in the process, and that's why she was mayor for 36 years. She was a hero in this moment of crisis, the largest evacuation in North American 20th century. Besides Hurricane Katrina. It was until Hurricane Katrina. And so her prophetic funeral, at which Obama's partner in crime, Justin Trudeau, spoke at after she died at 101, was coincidentally, and it was a coincidence because she died when she died, and you have to have a funeral, a certain amount of time after that. Her funeral was on February 14th, 2023, and that was coincidentally Hazel McCallion Day. I mean, there was a holiday made in Ontario prior to her death. So her funeral was on Hazel McCallion Day. Okay, but the Antichrist in partner in crime, Justin Trudeau, spoke at that, and it was 700 days, and she presided over her city, becoming the seventh biggest city. And again, as I explained earlier, Obama mentioned Mississauga 3 times, which gave it a 3 sets of 7. And that day was 370 weeks before the April 13th, 2023 sign, as I just explained earlier. So that 700 days is also 22 months and 30 days before January 13th, 2025. And that also is a hint at, like I explained earlier, 223, which is the 48th prime number. And again, the predicted explosion is predicted to lead to the 48th president, Barack Obama. Okay, but also this period of time is 191% of a year. And that's a number that hints at 9/11. Okay, God has used other 191 connections to hint at 9/11. It's very simple, right? It's obviously 2 1s and a 9. But again, Hurricane Hazel got her nickname from the 9 times 9 deaths from the hurricane, and she died at the age of 101. And that's a hint at 9/11. And her funeral, her prophetic funeral, is 191% of a year to the predicted bomb and evacuation from Manhattan Island. And she, of course, is symbolism for evacuation because of the bomb train and the evacuation from Montreal Island. Now, also, to confirm all of this even, God is brilliant. He gave us another sign, which was an evacuation due to toxic gas and material in the 48th state, which confirms all of this. So again, this date connects with the symbolic 22 months and 30 days, which hints at 223, the 48th prime number. But on the day of her prophetic funeral, there was an explosion and an evacuation in the 48th state. Well, I don't know if it was an explosion, but I can't recall, but there was a truck that crashed on the I-10 highway in Tucson, Arizona, where I used to live. And God has been using the I-10 to hint at 110. And that's because of Joshua, who led the Israelites around the walls of security and into the promised land on the date 110 and died at the age of 110. And around the walls of security, and on 9/11, and the walls of security collapsed on Jericho in God's judgment. And on 9/11, 110 floors of the Twin Towers collapsed in God's judgment. In the towers, it looked like a giant 11. But this evacuation caused by the truck that crashed with the toxic material on the I-10 and the closure of the I-10 hints at 110 and hints therefore at 9/11. And it connects with 191% of a year. But it's also the 48th state, and it connects with the, again, symbolic 48th prime number of period of time, like I just explained. So there you have it. Now, there's another detail that I forget. There's a university, and I think it's in Massachusetts. I'm pretty sure it was in Massachusetts, that on this date, the date of the closure of the I-10 in the 48th state and Hazel McCallion's prophetic funeral, was the opening day of a big exhibit of the, I think, the life of Barack Obama, or perhaps his presidency, probably his presidency. Anyway, it was a big deal at that particular university. But anyway, so I think I've explained this story now. I had to include the Hazel McCallion, mayor of Mississauga, part of this prophecy. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.